The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the dusty general store, and Sarah Vance stepped down into the unforgiving heat of Williamsburg, Texas, clutching a crumpled photograph of her sister so tightly the edges had begun to fray. She stood there for a moment, taking in the rough wooden buildings that lined the main street, the smell of horses and dust thick in the air, the relentless sun beating down on her shoulders through her dark traveling dress. It was June of 1882, and Sarah had traveled over 800 miles from St. Louis based on nothing more than a single letter that had arrived 3 months ago, postmarked from this small Texas town. The letter had been brief, almost cryptic, and then the correspondence had simply stopped. Emily, her younger sister by 2 years, had vanished into the vastness of West Texas without another word. Sarah adjusted the carpetbag in her hand and walked toward the general store, her boots kicking up small clouds of dirt with each step. The heat was oppressive, nothing like the humid summers back home. This was a dry, relentless heat that seemed to leach the moisture from everything it touched. Inside the store, a woman with graying hair looked up from behind the counter. Her expression was neutral, the kind of practiced indifference Sarah had come to expect from frontier merchants who had seen too many desperate people pass through their doors. "Good afternoon," Sarah said, setting her bag down carefully. "I am looking for information about my sister. Her name is Emily Vance. She would have arrived here sometime in March, perhaps early April." The woman studied Sarah for a long moment, then shook her head slowly. "I see a lot of faces come through here, miss. Cannot say I recall that particular name." Sarah pulled out the photograph, sliding it across the rough wooden counter. "She is 20 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes. She wrote to me saying she had found work here, but I have not heard from her since that one letter." The woman picked up the photograph, squinting at it in the dim light filtering through the dusty window. "Pretty girl," she said finally, but her tone was non-committal. "You might want to talk to Marshal Dixon, or perhaps some of the ranchers. They sometimes hire on help from out of town." "Where might I find the marshal?" "Office is 2 doors down on the left, but he is out on patrol most days. Might not be back until evening." Sarah thanked her and retrieved the photograph, carefully tucking it back into her reticule. The marshal's office was indeed just where the woman had indicated, but the door was locked and no one responded to her knock. Frustration began to build in her chest, mixing with the worry that had been her constant companion since Emily's letters had stopped coming. She walked the length of the main street, stopping in at the saloon, despite the disapproving looks she received as an unaccompanied woman. The bartender barely glanced at the photograph before waving her away. The boarding house keeper, a portly man with suspicious eyes, claimed he kept no records and could not remember everyone who passed through. By the time the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple, Sarah felt the first real stirrings of despair. She had been so certain that coming to Williamsburg would provide answers, that someone would remember Emily, that her sister would be here waiting with some perfectly reasonable explanation for the silence. She found herself standing at the edge of town, looking out at the vast expanse of grassland that stretched toward the horizon. The land here seemed to go on forever, empty and indifferent to human concerns. How did anyone find anything in such immensity? "You look lost." Sarah spun around, startled by the voice. A man stood a few feet away, leading a large bay horse by the reins. He was tall, probably in his late 20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends beneath his worn hat. His eyes were an unusual shade of gray-green, and they studied her with curiosity rather than suspicion. "I am looking for someone," Sarah said, straightening her shoulders. "My sister." She came to Williamsburg several months ago and I have not heard from her since. The man's expression shifted to something more serious. That is troubling. Have you spoken to the marshal? He was not at his office. I have asked everyone I could find, but no one seems to remember her. Sarah felt her voice waver slightly and hated herself for it. She had promised herself she would remain strong, would not break down until Emily was safely found. The man tied his horse to a nearby post and walked closer. I am Maxwell Zimmerman. I own a ranch about 5 miles north of town. I come into Williamsburg for supplies maybe once a week, so I see most folks who pass through. What is your sister's name? Emily Vance. I am Sarah. She pulled out the photograph again, holding it up for him to see. She is 20, blonde, blue eyes. She wrote that she had found work here. Maxwell took the photograph carefully, holding it up to catch the fading light. He studied it for a long moment, his brow furrowed in concentration. I have seen her, he said finally, and Sarah's heart leaped. I am almost certain, 3, maybe 4 months back. She was with Martha and Harold Peterson. They run a small farm about halfway between here and my ranch. She was with them. Are you certain? Pretty sure. The Petersons mentioned they had hired a girl from back east to help with their children and the house. Martha has not been well, needed the extra hands. The description fits, and I remember thinking the girl looked out of place, like she was not quite used to the rough living out here yet. Relief flooded through Sarah so intensely that she felt momentarily dizzy. Can you take me there? Please, I have been so worried. I need to see her to know she is safe. Maxwell glanced at the darkening sky. It is getting late. The Peterson place is not an easy ride in the dark, and you are not dressed for riding across open country. But I can take you first thing in the morning. There is a boarding house here in town where you can stay the night. I already have a room there, Sarah said quickly. But I do not want to wait. If Emily is so close, I need to see her tonight. I understand your urgency, but it would not be safe. The terrain between here and there is rough, full of holes and rocks that you cannot see in the dark. A horse could break a leg or worse. Maxwell's voice was firm but kind. I give you my word I will take you there at first light. That is just a few hours away. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she would go alone if necessary, but the rational part of her mind recognized the truth in his words. She had not ridden a horse in years, and she knew nothing of the land here. Getting injured or lost in the darkness would not help Emily. First light, she repeated. You promise? You have my word. Meet me at the livery stable as soon as the sun comes up. I will have horses ready. Sarah nodded, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. After 3 months of silence and fear, she finally had a real lead. Emily was at the Peterson farm, helping with children and housework. It all made sense. Perhaps the remoteness of the location explained the lack of letters. Perhaps there had been other messages that simply never reached St. Louis. Maxwell handed the photograph back to her, his fingers brushing hers briefly. Try to get some rest tonight. Tomorrow will be a long day. She wanted to ask him more questions, wanted to know everything he could remember about seeing Emily, but she forced herself to simply thank him and turn back toward the boarding house. The few hours until dawn would feel like an eternity, but at least now she had hope. True to her expectations, Sarah barely slept. She lay on the narrow bed in her small room, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the frontier town. Somewhere a dog barked intermittently. Footsteps passed by in the hallway. Voices rose and fell from the saloon down the street. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Emily's face, imagined the reunion, planned what she would say. The sky was just beginning to lighten when Sarah gave up on sleep entirely. She washed her face in the basin of water on the dresser, changed into her more practical brown traveling dress, and repinned her dark hair into a tight bun. Her hands shook slightly as she gathered her things. Today she would see Emily. Today all her fears would be put to rest. Maxwell was already at the livery stable when she arrived, just as the sun broke over the horizon. He had saddled 2 horses and was checking the straps on the smaller one, a gentle-looking mare with a white blaze on her face. "This is Daisy," he said, patting the mare's neck. "She has a steady temperament. She will not give you any trouble." Sarah approached the horse carefully. It had been at least 5 years since she had ridden, and even then it had been sedate rides through city parks, nothing like what she was about to attempt. Maxwell seemed to sense her hesitation. "Have you ridden much?" "Not recently," Sarah admitted, "but I can manage." He helped her mount, and Sarah was grateful for his steadying hand. Once she was settled in the saddle, Maxwell swung up onto his own horse with easy grace and led the way out of town. The ride was indeed challenging. They followed what could barely be called a trail, winding through tall grass and scattered mesquite trees. The land rolled gently but constantly, and Sarah had to focus on staying balanced as Daisy picked her way across the uneven ground. Maxwell kept the pace moderate, frequently glancing back to make sure she was managing. He pointed out landmarks as they rode, a distinctive rock formation, a dry creek bed that would run full during spring rains, the distant smudge of his own ranch buildings to the west. "How long have you owned your ranch?" Sarah asked, partly out of genuine curiosity and partly to distract herself from her nervousness about the ride. 5 years now. I came out here from Missouri after my father died. He left me enough money to buy the land and start a small herd. It has been hard work, but it is mine. No one else telling me what to do or how to do it. Do you run it alone? I have 3 men who work for me. Good men, reliable. During roundup I hire on more help, but for the day-to-day work we manage fine. They rode in companionable silence for a while. Sarah found herself studying Maxwell when she thought he was not paying attention. He sat his horse like he had been born in the saddle, comfortable and confident. His profile was strong, his jaw shadowed with stubble. She noticed the way his hands held the reins loosely, trusting his horse to know the way. After about an hour, Maxwell pointed ahead. "That is the Peterson place." Sarah looked where he indicated and saw a modest farmhouse surrounded by a few outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney and she could see chickens pecking in the yard. Her heart began to race. Emily was here. After all this time, all the worry, she was finally going to see her sister. They rode up to the house and Maxwell dismounted, then helped Sarah down. Her legs were shaky from the unfamiliar exercise, but she steadied herself against the horse until the feeling passed. Before they could reach the door, it opened. A woman in her 40s stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked tired, her face lined with worry or pain, but her expression was welcoming enough. "Maxwell," she said, "this is a surprise. What brings you by, Morning, Martha? This is Sarah Vance. She is looking for her sister, Emily. I thought I remembered you mentioning you had hired a girl from back east a few months ago." Martha's welcoming expression faltered, and Sarah felt her stomach drop. Something was wrong. "Emily Vance," Martha repeated slowly. "Yes, we did hire her. Sweet girl, good with the children. But she left us about 6 weeks ago." "Left?" Sarah heard her own voice rise. "Where did she go?" Martha looked uncomfortable. "She said she had an opportunity for better work. A man came by, said he was hiring for one of the big ranches further west, offered better pay than we could manage. Emily said she needed to send money home, so she took the position." "What man? Which ranch?" Maxwell's voice was sharp now. "I do not recall his name. He was well-dressed, said he represented the Thornton spread. That is a big operation about 40 miles west of here." Sarah felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. Why would she leave without writing to me? She knew I would worry. I am sorry, dear. I assumed she would have sent word. She seemed eager for the position, said it was too good an opportunity to pass up. Martha's expression was genuinely apologetic. If I had known you were looking for her, I would have tried to get more information. Maxwell's jaw was tight. The Thornton Ranch is not hiring domestic help. It is a cattle operation run by 3 brothers. They have a cook and a few ranch hands, that is all. A cold feeling began to spread through Sarah's chest. Then where did she go? I do not know, but I intend to find out. Maxwell turned back to Martha. This man who came for Emily, can you describe him? Martha thought for a moment. Tall, dark hair, well-groomed. He had a fancy carriage, not a wagon. Dressed like a businessman, not a rancher. He was very polite, very persuasive. Maxwell's expression grew darker. Did Emily go with him willingly? She seemed excited about it, yes. Though now that you mention it, there was something a bit odd. He was in a hurry to leave. Did not want to stay for a meal or even water the horses properly. Just wanted to collect Emily and her things and be on his way. Sarah felt tears threatening but forced them back. I need to find her. Please, can you tell me anything else? I wish I could, dear. I truly do. Harold might remember more. He spoke to the man more than I did. But Harold is out checking on the cattle right now. He will not be back until this afternoon. Maxwell put a hand on Sarah's shoulder, and the warmth of it was oddly comforting. We will come back and talk to Harold, but I think I know someone who might have more information. There is a man named Samuel Briggs who runs the freight office in town. If anyone has heard about strangers offering employment, it would be him. They thanked Martha and mounted the horses again. Sarah felt numb, her earlier hope crushed under the weight of new worry. Emily had not simply found work and forgotten to write. She had been lured away by someone offering false promises. Every instinct Sarah had screamed that her sister was in danger. The ride back to Williamsburg seemed to take twice as long. Sarah's mind raced with terrible possibilities. She had read stories in the newspapers back in St. Louis about young women who disappeared, lured by false promises of employment. The articles never ended well. Maxwell seemed to sense her thoughts. We will find her, he said firmly. Whatever is going on, we will get to the bottom of it. You do not have to help me, Sarah said, though even as she spoke the words she desperately hoped he would ignore them. This is not your concern. A young woman is missing, possibly in danger. That makes it my concern. Besides, he added, and there was something warm in his tone, you cannot search all of West Texas alone. They reached Williamsburg just before noon and went straight to the freight office. Samuel Briggs was a weathered man with shrewd eyes and a detailed knowledge of everyone and everything that passed through town. He listened to Maxwell's questions, then nodded slowly. I have heard rumors. Nothing concrete, mind you, but talk of men recruiting young women for work in the mining camps up north. They promise good wages, respectable positions, but some of the girls who leave are never heard from again. Mining camps. Sarah felt sick. What kind of work? Samuel hesitated, glancing at Maxwell. The kind no respectable woman would do willingly. I am sorry, miss, but you need to know what you might be dealing with. Sarah understood. Of course she understood. The newspapers had been full of such stories, though they were always vague, couched in euphemisms. Young women tricked into brothels, trapped by debt and distance. How do I find these men? Sarah demanded. Where do they take the girls? That I cannot tell you. Like I said, it is all rumors and whispers. But if you want real information, you might talk to Deputy Wilson. He has been tracking reports of missing women for the marshal. They found Deputy Wilson at the saloon, eating a late lunch. He was a young man, probably not yet 30, with an earnest face and a serious demeanor. When Maxwell explained the situation, the deputy's expression grew grim. "I know about this operation," he said quietly, setting down his fork. "We have been trying to gather evidence for months. The problem is, by the time families realize their daughters or sisters are missing, the trail has gone cold. These men are careful, they cover their tracks well. But you must have some idea where they take the women," Maxwell pressed. Wilson looked around the saloon, then lowered his voice. "There is a man named Victor Kane. He runs a series of establishments up in the mining territories, places where men outnumber women 50-1. He sends recruiters through small towns, looking for young women who are alone, vulnerable, or desperate for work. They promise legitimate employment, good wages, sometimes even travel expenses. Once the girls are far enough from home, the truth comes out." Sarah felt her hands clench into fists. "And you have done nothing to stop him." "We have tried," Wilson said defensively. "But Kane operates across multiple territories. He has connections, money, and he is careful never to break the law himself. His recruiters are the ones doing the dirty work, and they move around constantly. By the time we get word of a recruitment, they are long gone." "Where are these mining camps?" Maxwell asked. "The main ones Kane supplies are up near Silver City, New Mexico territory. But that is a hard 5 days' ride from here, more if the weather turns. And even if you get there, finding one specific girl among all those camps will not be easy." Sarah stood abruptly. "Then I will leave today. Every moment I waste is another moment Emily is in danger." "Hold on," Maxwell said, standing as well. "You cannot just ride into mining territory alone. It is dangerous country, and you do not know what you will be walking into." "I do not have a choice. She is my sister." Maxwell exchanged a look with Deputy Wilson, then turned back to Sarah. "Give me 1 day. Let me arrange supplies, get more information, talk to Harold Peterson, and see if he remembers anything else about the man who took Emily. We leave tomorrow at dawn, properly equipped for the journey." "We," Sarah repeated. "You do not think I am letting you go alone, do you? You need someone who knows the territory, who can handle trouble if it comes up. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "my ranch can survive without me for a couple weeks." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could manage on her own, but the truth was she needed help. She knew nothing about surviving in the wilderness, about navigating across hundreds of miles of unfamiliar territory. Maxwell was offering her exactly what she needed, and pride was a luxury she could not afford. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I do not know how I will ever repay you." "Find your sister. That will be payment enough." The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation. Maxwell made arrangements with his ranch hands to manage things in his absence. Sarah bought practical clothing for the journey, trading her dresses for sturdy canvas pants and cotton shirts that the shopkeeper's wife found for her with a knowing look. She purchased a wide-brimmed hat to protect her from the sun, and spent nearly an hour being fitted for proper riding boots. Maxwell handled the supplies, packing enough food, water, and ammunition for the long journey. He also bought an extra horse to carry their gear, and a rifle which he insisted Sarah learn to shoot before they left. They went out to the edge of town as the sun was setting, and Maxwell set up targets against a dirt embankment. He showed her how to load the rifle, how to sight down the barrel, how to squeeze the trigger rather than pull it. The first shot surprised her with its noise and the kick against her shoulder. The second shot went wide, but by the 10th attempt she was hitting the target more often than not. "You have a good eye," Maxwell said approvingly. "With practice, you will be a decent shot." "I hope I will not need to use it," Sarah replied, lowering the rifle. "So do I. But it is better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it." They returned to town as darkness fell. Sarah ate dinner at the boarding house, though she barely tasted the food. Her mind was already on the trail ahead, imagining the journey, picturing the moment when she would finally find Emily. That night, she lay in bed and let herself think about Maxwell Zimmerman. He was a stranger who had no obligation to help her, yet he was preparing to leave his livelihood behind for weeks to help search for a girl he did not even know. She wondered what drove such kindness. Was it simply the code of the frontier, the understanding that people helped each other because survival often depended on it? Or was there something more? She remembered the way his hand had felt on her shoulder, solid and reassuring. The way his eyes had met hers with understanding when she explained her fear. There was something about him that made her feel safe, despite the circumstances. Sarah pushed the thoughts aside. This was not the time for such considerations. Emily was all that mattered. Everything else would have to wait. Dawn came too slowly and too quickly. Sarah was up before the sun, dressed in her new traveling clothes, her few belongings packed into a worn leather saddlebag Maxwell had provided. She met him at the livery stable where he already had the horses ready. "It is about 150 miles to Silver City," Maxwell said as he checked the pack horses' load one final time. "If we push hard and the weather cooperates, we can make it in 5 days, but it will not be an easy ride." "I can manage," Sarah said firmly. They rode out of Williamsburg, just as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Sarah looked back once at the small town, then fixed her eyes on the trail ahead. The first day was brutal. They covered nearly 30 miles, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and eat some of the dried beef and hard bread Maxwell had packed. Sarah's muscles screamed in protest, unaccustomed to so many hours in the saddle, but she gritted her teeth and said nothing. Maxwell seemed to notice her discomfort anyway. "We can slow down," he offered as they made camp that night beside a small creek. "No, the faster we travel, the sooner we find Emily." Maxwell built a fire while Sarah tended to the horses, following his earlier instructions on how to unsaddle them and check their hooves for stones. The routine tasks were soothing, giving her something to focus on besides the ache in her legs and back. They ate a simple meal of beans and bacon cooked over the fire. As darkness fell completely, the stars emerged overhead, more numerous than Sarah had ever seen back east. "It is beautiful out here," she said softly, staring up at the vast expanse of sky. "It is," Maxwell agreed. "But it is harsh too, beautiful and harsh often at the same time." "Is that why you came out here? For the beauty?" "Partly. Mostly I came for the freedom. Back in Missouri, I was just another farmhand on my father's land, following his rules, living his life. Out here, I am my own man. I succeed or fail based on my own choices." "You ever regret it? The isolation, the difficulty?" Maxwell was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "Sometimes, when the winters are hard and the cattle are dying, and I wonder if I will make it through another season. But then spring comes, and I see the calves being born, and I remember why I chose this life." Sarah found herself wanting to know more about him, this man who had upended his life to help a stranger. "Do you have family back in Missouri? A sister?" "She married a merchant and seems happy enough in town life. We write occasionally, but we have never been close. My mother died when I was young, and my father was not a man who encouraged affection." He looked over at her. "What about you? Besides Emily, do you have other family?" "Our parents died 6 years ago in a cholera outbreak. It was just Emily and me after that. I worked as a seamstress, barely making enough for us to get by. Emily wanted more, wanted adventure and opportunity. When she saw an advertisement seeking young women for work in Texas, She jumped at the chance. I tried to talk her out of it, but she was so excited, so certain it would be the start of something wonderful. Sarah's voice broke slightly on the last word, and she looked away, blinking back tears. "We will find her," Maxwell said again, and there was such certainty in his voice that Sarah almost believed him. They took turns keeping watch that night, though Sarah suspected Maxwell barely slept during his off hours. She lay in her bedroll, wrapped in a thick blanket, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the prairie night. Coyotes howled in the distance. The horses shifted and snorted. Wind whispered through the grass. The next 4 days fell into a pattern. They woke before dawn, ate a quick breakfast, and rode hard until midday. They would rest for an hour, then continue until the light began to fail. Each night Maxwell would set up camp with practiced efficiency while Sarah handled the horses. They would eat, talk quietly by the fire, then sleep in shifts. Sarah found herself looking forward to those evening conversations more than she cared to admit. Maxwell was a good listener, asking questions that showed genuine interest in her life back in St. Louis, her work as a seamstress, her dreams for the future. In turn, he shared stories of his time building the ranch, the challenges he had faced, the small victories that kept him going. On the third night, as they sat by the fire, Maxwell asked, "What will you do when we find Emily? Will you take her back to St. Louis?" Sarah had been thinking about this very question. "I do not know. Part of me wants to take her home immediately to get her away from all this, but St. Louis holds nothing for us anymore. Perhaps we should look for opportunities somewhere else, somewhere we can make a fresh start together." "You could stay in Texas," Maxwell said carefully. "It is rough country, but there are opportunities for those willing to work hard." Something in his tone made Sarah look up sharply. Maxwell was staring into the fire, his expression unreadable. "I will go wherever Emily needs me to be," Sarah said finally. "She is my priority." "Of course," Maxwell agreed quickly. "I only meant that you should not feel obligated to return to a place that holds bad memories." The fourth day brought them into rougher terrain. The flat grasslands gave way to rocky hills and deep arroyos. Maxwell guided them carefully, clearly familiar with this kind of country. When they stopped at a small creek to water the horses, Sarah noticed the way he constantly scanned the horizon, alert for any sign of danger. "Are you expecting trouble?" she asked. "Always expecting it," he replied. "Not always finding it, but always ready. This is wild country, Sarah. We could encounter anything from bandits to hostile tribes to simple bad luck." As if to prove his point, they crested a hill that afternoon and found the trail ahead blocked by a rockslide. Maxwell studied the situation, then led them on a detour that added 2 hours to their journey. By the time they made camp that night, Sarah was exhausted. Her entire body ached, her face was sunburned despite the hat, and she was fairly certain she would never walk normally again. But they were close now. Maxwell estimated they would reach Silver City by tomorrow afternoon. "Tell me about the mining camps," Sarah said as they ate dinner. "What should I expect?" Maxwell's expression grew serious. "They are rough places. Lots of men, little law, less civilization. The money from the mines attracts all kinds. Some decent folks trying to make an honest living, others looking for easy marks and quick profits. You will need to stay close to me at all times. Some of these men have not seen a respectable woman in months, and they do not always remember their manners." "I am not afraid," Sarah said, though her stomach twisted with anxiety. "Fear can be useful. It keeps you alert. Just trust me to handle things and we will be fine." That night, Sarah lay awake long after she should have been sleeping, thinking about what tomorrow might bring. Would Emily be in Silver City? Would they find her quickly, or would they have to search camp by camp? And what state would Emily be in when they found her? Sarah tried not to think about the worst possibilities, but they crept in anyway. 3 months. Emily had been missing for 3 months. So much could happen in that time. She must have eventually fallen asleep because she woke to Maxwell gently shaking her shoulder. "Time to go," he said quietly. "We want to reach Silver City while it is still light." They made good time that morning, pushing the horses harder than they had on previous days. The terrain became increasingly mountainous, pine trees replacing the mesquite and scrub. Sarah could see snow on the distant peaks, though down here the air was warm and dry. Around mid-afternoon, they topped a rise and looked down into a wide valley. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys. Tents and rough wooden buildings sprawled across the landscape in no particular order. Even from a distance, Sarah could hear the noise, the shouts of men, the clang of metal on metal, the general chaos of a place built around greed and hope. "Silver City," Maxwell said. "Or at least the main camp. There are smaller operations scattered throughout these hills." They rode down into the valley. Up close, the camp was even rougher than Sarah had imagined. Men lounged outside saloons and gambling halls, their faces grimy with dirt and stubble. Women in gaudy dresses called out from doorways, their painted faces harsh in the bright sunlight. The streets, if they could be called that, were muddy despite the dry weather, churned up by constant traffic. Maxwell led them to what appeared to be a more respectable establishment, a hotel of sorts with an actual wooden sign declaring it the Silver Palace. He helped Sarah dismount, then spoke quietly to a man lounging outside. "Watch the horses. There is extra if they are still here when I come back." Inside, the hotel was only marginally cleaner than the street. The proprietor, a balding man with suspicious eyes, looked them over carefully. "We need information," Maxwell said, laying coins on the counter. "We are looking for a girl, blonde hair, blue eyes, about 20 years old. She would have arrived maybe 6 weeks ago." The proprietor palmed the coins. "That is not much of a description. We get girls through here all the time." Maxwell laid down more coins. "This girl was brought here under false pretenses, promised legitimate work. Her name is Emily Vance." The man's expression shifted slightly. "Emily. Yeah, I remember her. Sweet girl, scared out of her mind when she realized what kind of work she had been brought here for. She only lasted a few days before Victor Kane moved her to one of his other operations." Sarah felt sick. "Where?" "Could not tell you for certain. Kane runs 3 establishments that I know of, maybe more. He moves the girls around depending on demand. Your best bet is to ask Kane directly, but good luck getting in to see him. He is a careful man, does not like unexpected visitors." "Where is he?" Maxwell's voice had gone cold. "Has a big house on the north end of camp. You cannot miss it. It is the only building around here with actual glass windows." They left the hotel and walked through the camp toward the north end. Sarah kept her eyes down, acutely aware of the stairs following her. Maxwell stayed close, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. Kane's house was indeed unmistakable. It was a 2-story structure that looked wildly out of place among the tents and shacks surrounding it. 2 men stood outside, clearly guards, watching their approach with hostile expressions. "We are here to see Victor Kane," Maxwell said. "He is not seeing anyone today," one of the guards replied. "He will see us." Maxwell's voice carried absolute conviction. "Tell him we are here about Emily Vance." The guards exchanged glances. One of them disappeared inside while the other continued to watch them warily. After several long minutes, the first guard returned. "He will give you 5 minutes. No weapons." Maxwell reluctantly unbuckled his gun belt and handed it over. They were led inside to a well-appointed office that would not have looked out of place in St. Louis. A man sat behind a large desk, dressed in an expensive suit, his hair perfectly groomed. He was probably in his 40s, handsome in a cold sort of way. "Emily Vance," Kane said without preamble. "What is your interest in her?" "I am her sister," Sarah said, stepping forward. "I want to know where she is." Kane studied her with calculating eyes. "She is working for me, under contract, perfectly legal arrangement." "A contract signed under false pretenses is not legal," Maxwell interjected. "You promised her legitimate work and delivered her into prostitution. That is kidnapping and fraud." "That is a serious accusation." Kane's voice was mild, but there was steel underneath. "Do you have proof?" "We have the testimony of the people who witnessed your recruiter taking her from their farm," Sarah said. "We have proof she came here expecting legitimate employment. And I am certain Emily herself will testify to the lies she was told." Kane leaned back in his chair. "Let us say, hypothetically, that I know where this girl is. What exactly do you intend to do? You cannot just take her. She owes me money. Travel expenses, room and board, clothing. It adds up." "How much?" Maxwell asked flatly. $500. "That is robbery," Sarah gasped. "That is business. Your sister agreed to certain terms. She incurred certain debts. If you want her back, you will need to satisfy those debts." Maxwell pulled a leather wallet from his jacket. "I have $200 here." "That is more than generous compensation for a few weeks of supposed expenses." Kane did not even glance at the money. "500, not a dollar less." "I do not have that kind of money," Sarah said desperately. "Please, she is my sister. She is all I have left." For just a moment, something flickered in Kane's expression. Then it was gone, replaced by cold indifference. "Then I suggest you start saving. When you have the full amount, come back and we can discuss your sister's release." "You cannot keep her prisoner," Maxwell said, his voice dangerous now. "I am not keeping her prisoner. She is free to leave any time once her debts are satisfied. That is the law." Kane stood. "Now our 5 minutes are up. My men will show you out." The guards appeared in the doorway. Maxwell looked like he wanted to argue further, but Sarah touched his arm. "Let us go," she said quietly. "There has to be another way." Outside, Maxwell reclaimed his gun belt, his jaw tight with anger. "He is right about one thing. As long as Emily supposedly owes him money, he can claim she is working off a legitimate debt. The law will not help us here." "Then what do we do?" Sarah felt tears threatening again. They had come so far, had been so close. "We find Emily first, see if she is even in this camp or if Kane has her somewhere else. Then we figure out a way to get her out." They spent the rest of the afternoon discreetly questioning people around the camp. Most were tight-lipped, unwilling to talk about Kane's operations. But finally, they found a woman, older than most of the working girls, with kinder eyes. "Emily," she repeated when Sarah showed her the photograph. "Pretty girl. She is at the Blue Lady, that is Kane's main establishment here, but be careful. Kane has men watching all his properties. You try to just walk in and take her, there will be trouble." "Can you get a message to her?" Sarah asked. "Tell her I am here, that I am trying to get her out." The woman hesitated. "I can try, but it will have to wait until tonight when things get busy. Less chance of being noticed. Please," Sarah begged. "Tell her to hold on, that I will find a way." The woman nodded and slipped away into the crowd. Maxwell led Sarah back to the hotel where he rented them 2 rooms, both on the 2nd floor. "Get some rest," he said. "Tonight we will figure out a plan." Sarah tried to rest, but her mind would not settle. Emily was so close, maybe just a few buildings away, trapped in a nightmare. The thought of what her sister had endured over the past weeks made Sarah's stomach churn. There was a knock at her door after dark. Sarah opened it to find Maxwell there, his expression grim. "I have been thinking about our options. We could try to break her out tonight, but that is risky." Kane's men are armed and they will not hesitate to shoot. We could try to raise the $500, but that will take time we might not have." "What is the third option?" Sarah asked. "We go to the marshal in the actual town of Silver City. This mining camp is technically outside their jurisdiction, but if we can convince them to investigate Kane's operation, they might be able to shut him down or at least force him to release Emily without payment. Will they believe us? I do not know, but it is worth trying." Maxwell paused. "The town is about 3 miles from here. We could ride there tomorrow, speak to the marshal, and be back by afternoon." Sarah nodded slowly. It was not a perfect plan, but it was better than nothing. "All right. We try that first, but if it does not work, I am not waiting any longer. I will find a way to get Emily out with or without the law's help." "Fair enough." Maxwell left her then, and Sarah finally lay down on the narrow bed. She thought about Emily, somewhere in this camp, probably wondering if anyone was coming for her. "Hold on," Sarah thought fiercely. "I am here. I am coming for you." The next morning they rode to Silver City proper. It was smaller than the mining camp, but infinitely more civilized, with actual streets and businesses and people who did not look like they were one step away from violence. The marshal's office was easy to find. Marshal Thompson was a gray-haired man in his 50s, with the weathered look of someone who had seen too much. He listened to their story without interrupting, his expression giving nothing away. When they finished, he sighed. "I know about Victor Kane. So does every lawman within 100 miles. He is careful, always staying just on the right side of the law. These girls sign contracts. That makes it a civil matter, not criminal." "But the contracts are based on fraud," Sarah protested. "He lures them with false promises, proving that is the problem. It is his word against theirs, and Kane has lawyers who make sure everything looks legitimate on paper." Thompson spread his hands. "I am sorry, miss. I truly am. But unless you can prove he forced your sister into this against her will, there is not much I can do." "So we are just supposed to give him $500? Maxwell demanded. "Or find another way to satisfy the debt. Some families have negotiated reduced payments. Some have gotten the girls to escape and then hidden them until Kane moves on. It is not right, but it is the reality of the situation." They left the marshal's office with no more help than when they entered. Sarah felt a crushing despair settling over her. "There has to be something we can do," she said as they stood on the wooden sidewalk outside. "I refuse to believe we have come this far only to be stopped by corruption and legal technicalities." Maxwell was quiet for a long moment, then he straightened. "I have an idea. It is risky and you might not like it, but hear me out. I am listening. What if we do not try to take Emily by force or negotiate her release? What if we simply make it too expensive for Kane to keep her? I do not understand. Kane runs a business. His establishments rely on attracting customers who have money to spend. If those establishments suddenly became less profitable, or if maintaining them became more trouble than it is worth, Kane might be willing to cut his losses." Sarah still did not follow. "How do we make his business less profitable? We cause problems." "Nothing violent. Nothing that will get us arrested, but enough disruption that keeping Emily becomes more trouble than letting her go." Over the next hour, as they rode back to the mining camp, Maxwell laid out his plan. It was audacious and risky, but Sarah could not think of anything better. They would need help, and they would need to move quickly, but it might just work. That afternoon, Maxwell began recruiting. He was careful, choosing men who had their own grievances with Kane, who had been cheated or mistreated by the crime boss's operation. It turned out there were more than Sarah would have guessed. A miner named Jack, whose brother had been beaten by Kane's thugs for a gambling debt. A bartender who had been forced to sell his establishment to Kane for far less than it was worth. a freight hauler who had been run out of the camp for refusing to transport Kane's goods. By evening, they had assembled a group of about 15 men, all willing to cause Kane some problems. The plan was simple. Starting that night, they would make things difficult for Kane's operations. Small things at first, customers warned away, supplies delayed, rumors spread about diseases in the establishments. Nothing Kane could directly trace back to them, but enough to hurt his profits. Meanwhile, Sarah would continue trying to get messages to Emily, letting her know the plan and preparing her to be ready when the opportunity came. The campaign began that very night. Maxwell's recruits spread out through the camp, quietly telling customers that Kane's establishments had been raided by the marshal, that girls were sick, that better options existed elsewhere. The freight hauler delayed a shipment of whiskey that was supposed to arrive at the Blue Lady. Someone, Sarah never learned who, started a small fire in the kitchen of another of Kane's buildings, causing enough damage to shut it down for repairs. Nothing major. Nothing Kane could definitively blame on anyone, but enough to be annoying and costly. Sarah, meanwhile, made contact with the older woman again. "Did you give Emily my message?" "I did. She cried when she heard you were here. She has been so scared, thought she would never see you again. Tell her to be ready. Within the next few days, I am going to get her out of there." For 3 days, they kept up the pressure. Kane's men came looking for Maxwell and Sarah, but they were careful, always surrounded by people, never alone, never in a position where they could be threatened or harmed. On the 4th day, Sarah was approached by one of Kane's guards as she walked through camp. Her heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "Kane wants to see you, just you, not the man." Sarah glanced at Maxwell, who had been shadowing her. He looked like he wanted to argue, but Sarah shook her head slightly. "I will be fine." She followed the guard to Kane's house. This time she was taken to a different room, a sitting area rather than the office. Kane stood by the window, his back to her. "You have been causing me problems," he said without turning around. "I have been trying to get my sister back, through harassment and sabotage." Now he turned and his expression was cold. "I could have you arrested or worse." "You could try," Sarah said, forcing steel into her voice. "But that would only bring more attention to your operations, more scrutiny. The marshal in Silver City might not care about one girl, but he would have to act if violence breaks out in the camps." Kane studied her for a long moment. "You are braver than you look. Or more foolish, I cannot decide which. I am desperate, and I am not leaving without my sister. I can see that." Kane moved to a small table and poured himself a drink. "Here is what I am willing to offer. $300 paid within 24 hours and you can have your sister." "That is my final offer." Sarah's mind raced. She had maybe $50 left from what she had brought from St. Louis. Maxwell had already given $200 to Kane. Where would they get another $300? "Give me until tomorrow evening," she said. "I will get your money. Tomorrow evening. 1 minute late, and the offer is void." Sarah left Kane's house with her heart pounding. She found Maxwell waiting nearby and quickly explained what had happened. $300, Maxwell said grimly. "I can probably raise another 100 by selling some equipment." "That leaves us 200 short." "What about your ranch?" Sarah asked, though the words felt wrong even as she said them. "Could you take out a loan against it?" "Not in the time we have. Even if I could find someone willing to loan that much, the paperwork alone would take days." They walked through the camp, both of them thinking furiously. Sarah considered selling her mother's wedding ring, the only piece of jewelry she owned, but knew it would not bring nearly enough money. As they passed a gambling hall, Maxwell suddenly stopped. "Wait here," he said. "What are you going to do?" "Something probably stupid." He gave her a wry smile. "But it might be our only chance." Before Sarah could protest, Maxwell walked into the gambling hall. She waited outside, anxiety gnawing at her. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. When Maxwell finally emerged, his face was unreadable. He took Sarah's arm and led her away from the gambling hall, not speaking until they were well out of earshot. "I have $280, he said quietly. "How?" "Poker. I am a decent player and I got lucky." Sarah felt a wave of relief so intense it made her dizzy. "That means we have enough. With what you already have and what I have left, we can meet Kane's price." "We can." Maxwell's expression was serious. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. Once we do this, I will be nearly broke. The money I just won, combined with what I already gave Kane and what I spent on supplies for this trip, that is most of my savings. My ranch will be fine, but I will not have much of a cushion for the winter." "Then we should not do it," Sarah said, even though the words felt like they were tearing out of her heart. "I cannot let you bankrupt yourself for my sister." "Yes, you can, because it is the right thing to do and because I am offering freely." Maxwell took her hands and the warmth of his touch sent a shiver through her. "Sarah, these past days searching with you, seeing your determination and your courage, it has meant something to me. You have come to mean something to me. So let me do this. Let me help you save your sister." Sarah looked up at him, at his steady gray-green eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. This man, who had been a stranger just over a week ago, had given up his time, his money, and his safety to help her. He had stood by her through every obstacle, never wavering, never complaining. "I do not know how to thank you," she whispered. "You do not have to thank me." Maxwell's thumb brushed across her knuckles. "Just let me be there when you and Emily are reunited. That will be thanks enough." The next evening, as the sun was setting, they went to Kane's house with the full $300. Kane counted it carefully, then nodded. "A pleasure doing business with you. Emily will be brought here within the hour." It was the longest hour of Sarah's life. She paced the room Kane had left them in, unable to sit still, barely able to breathe. Maxwell stood by the window, keeping watch, ensuring this was not some kind of trap. Then the door opened and Emily was there. She was thinner than Sarah remembered, her face pale, her eyes haunted. But it was Emily, alive and whole. For a moment they just stared at each other, then Sarah rushed forward and pulled her sister into her arms. Emily collapsed against her, sobbing. "I am so sorry, I am so sorry. I thought it was real. I thought I was going to have a good job and be able to send money home. I was so stupid." "You were not stupid," Sarah said fiercely, holding her sister tight. "You were tricked by bad men. None of this is your fault." They held each other for a long time, both crying now. Maxwell stood back, giving them space, but Sarah could see the emotion on his face as well. Finally, Emily pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Who is this?" she asked, looking at Maxwell. "This is Maxwell Zimmerman. He helped me find you. We could not have done this without him." Emily turned to Maxwell, and despite everything she had been through, Sarah saw a flash of her sister's old spirit in her eyes. "Thank you," Emily said simply. "Thank you for bringing my sister to me. You are welcome. Are you able to travel? We should leave this camp as soon as possible." "I can travel. I can do anything as long as it means getting away from here." They left Kane's house quickly, collecting the horses and supplies they had left at the hotel. Within an hour, they were riding away from the mining camp, back toward the south and civilization. Emily was quiet for most of the journey, and Sarah did not push her to talk. Whatever her sister had endured over the past weeks, she would share it when she was ready. For now, it was enough that they were together again, that they were safe. They made camp that first night in a small clearing surrounded by pine trees. Sarah helped Emily settle by the fire while Maxwell tended the horses. When he returned, Emily spoke for the first time since leaving the camp. He really bankrupted himself to buy my freedom, did he not? Sarah glanced at Maxwell, who was unpacking supplies. He spent most of his savings, yes. Why? He does not even know me. Maxwell looked up, his expression serious. Because it was the right thing to do, and because your sister was not going to rest until you were safe. Helping her meant helping you. Emily studied him for a long moment, then looked at Sarah. You care about him. It was not a question. Sarah felt her cheeks flush. I am grateful to him. That is not what I said. Emily smiled slightly, the first smile Sarah had seen from her. You care about him. I can see it in the way you look at him. Sarah did not know how to respond to that. Yes, she cared about Maxwell. Over the past week, she had come to rely on him, to trust him, to value his presence in a way that went beyond simple gratitude. But this was not the time to explore those feelings, not when everything was still so uncertain. The journey back to Texas took 6 days. Emily grew stronger with each mile that separated her from the mining camp. She still did not talk much about what had happened to her, but Sarah saw her sister's resilience, her determination not to let the experience destroy her. Maxwell remained a steady presence, patient and kind with both sisters, never pushing, never demanding anything in return for what he had done. On the last night before they would reach Williamsburg, Sarah could not sleep. She lay in her bedroll, staring up at the stars, thinking about what came next. She and Emily needed to make plans to decide where they would go, what they would do. She heard soft footsteps and turned to see Maxwell approaching. Cannot sleep either, he asked quietly, settling down beside her bedroll. Too much on my mind. I can understand that. Maxwell was quiet for a moment. Have you thought about what you will do now? Will you go back to St. Louis? I do not think so. There is nothing there for us anymore, but I am not sure where we should go. Sarah turned to look at him. What about you? Will you go back to your ranch? That is the plan. Though I will admit, going back to the isolation and routine is not as appealing as it once was. Why not? Maxwell met her eyes in the starlight. Because this past week with you has reminded me what I have been missing: company, conversation, purpose beyond just surviving another day. Sarah's breath caught. Maxwell, I know this is not the right time, he said quickly. You have just gotten your sister back. You are both dealing with trauma. You need time to heal and figure out your futures. But I want you to know that when you are ready, if you are interested, I would like to see where this might go. Whatever this is between us. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. I would like that too, very much. Maxwell smiled, and even in the dim light, Sarah could see the warmth in his expression. He reached out and took her hand, holding it gently. They sat like that for a long time, not talking, just being together under the vast western sky. They reached Williamsburg the next afternoon. Maxwell took them straight to the boarding house where Sarah had stayed before, arranging rooms for both sisters. Sarah wanted to protest the additional expense after everything he had already spent, but Maxwell waved away her concerns. Consider it part of the adventure, he said with a small smile. Emily went upstairs to rest, and Sarah walked outside with Maxwell. He needed to ride out to his ranch to check on his men and his livestock, to begin putting his life back in order. When will I see you again? Sarah asked, surprised by how much the thought of him leaving hurt. Give me 3 days to handle business at the ranch, then I will come back to town. We can talk about the future, all 3 of us. Maxwell hesitated. Sarah, I meant what I said last night. I care about you. These feelings are not going to disappear just because we are back in civilization. I care about you too, Sarah said softly. I think I started caring somewhere between Williamsburg and Silver City, though I was too focused on finding Emily to let myself acknowledge it. Maxwell stepped closer, and Sarah's heart began to race. He reached up and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "May I write to you? While I am at the ranch, you will only be gone 3 days. I know, but I will still want to write to you," Sarah smiled. "Then yes, you may write to me." Maxwell smiled back, and for a moment Sarah thought he might kiss her. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently and stepped back. 3 days, he promised, then mounted his horse and rode away. Sarah watched until he disappeared from view, then went back inside to check on Emily. Her sister was sitting on the bed in her room, staring out the window. She looked up when Sarah entered. "He is a good man," Emily said. "You are lucky to have found him." "I think we are both lucky. If circumstances had been different, we might never have met." Emily was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, I need to tell you what happened, what they made me do." "You do not have to tell me anything until you are ready." "I know. But I need to say it. I need you to know." Emily took a deep breath. "When I arrived at the Peterson farm, I thought everything was fine. They were kind, the work was hard but honest. Then that man came, talking about better opportunities. I was stupid enough to believe him." "You were not stupid," Sarah said firmly. "You were hopeful. That is different. When we got to the mining camp, he took me straight to Kane's building. That is when he told me the truth about what kind of work I would be doing. I refused. I tried to leave. They locked me in a room for 2 days with no food, telling me I owed them money and I would not leave until I paid it back." Sarah felt anger burning in her chest but kept quiet, letting Emily continue. "Eventually I agreed. I did not see any other choice. They put me in that place, the Blue Lady, and told me I had to entertain customers. I managed to avoid the worst of it for the first week. I would talk to the men, pour them drinks, let them think they were making progress. But I knew it was only a matter of time before Kane forced me to do more." "You do not have to tell me the details," Sarah said gently. "I want you to know that I never stopped fighting, even when I felt hopeless. I never stopped believing you would come for me, and you did." Emily's voice broke. "You came all the way across the territory and you saved me." Sarah moved to the bed and wrapped her arms around her sister. "You saved yourself by staying strong. I just helped get you out." They held each other, and Sarah felt Emily's body shake with sobs. They stayed like that until Emily had no tears left, until the sun had set and darkness filled the room. Over the next 3 days, Sarah and Emily began to heal. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. Emily spoke more about her ordeal, getting the poison out of her system. Sarah told her sister about the journey to find her, about Maxwell's help, about the feelings that had developed between them. "What will you do if he asks you to stay?" Emily asked on the second evening as they sat together in the boarding house dining room. "What would you want to do? Would you want to stay in Texas, or would you rather go somewhere else?" Emily considered the question. "Honestly, I am not sure I ever want to see another mining camp or rough frontier town again, but Texas is a big place. Maybe there is a spot for us somewhere quieter, somewhere we could start fresh." Maxwell mentioned his ranch is fairly isolated. He has a few hands who work for him, but mostly it is quiet. "You are thinking about his ranch specifically, are you not?" Emily said with a knowing look. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Perhaps, but only if you would be comfortable there. I am not making any decisions without you. Sarah, you do not have to organize your life around me. I am an adult. I can take care of myself. You are my sister. Taking care of you is not an obligation. It is what I want to do." Emily reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. "Then here is what I want. I want you to be happy. If Maxwell makes you happy, if staying in Texas makes you happy, then that is what we should do. I will find my own path, but I do not want to be the reason you give up on something good." On the third day, just after noon, Maxwell returned to Williamsburg. Sarah saw him from the boarding house window and her heart skipped. She took a moment to check her appearance in the small mirror, smoothing her hair, then hurried downstairs. Maxwell was tying his horse outside when she emerged. He turned at the sound of the door and his whole face lit up when he saw her. "You came back," Sarah said, then felt foolish because of course he had come back. He had said he would. "I said 3 days. It has been 3 days." Maxwell stepped closer. "I missed you." "It has only been 3 days," Sarah echoed her earlier thought. "I know. I still missed you." He glanced toward the boarding house. "How is Emily?" "Better. Stronger. She is healing." "Good. That is good." Maxwell seemed almost nervous, which was so unlike his usual calm confidence that Sarah found it endearing. "Sarah, I have been thinking about what I said, about wanting to see where this goes between us, and I realize I am doing this all backwards. Normally, a man would court a woman properly, with time and tradition and all the right steps. These are not normal circumstances," Sarah pointed out. "No, they are not, but that does not mean I should not try to do this right." Maxwell took her hand. "So let me start over. Sarah Vance, would you allow me to court you properly with all the steps I probably should have taken from the beginning?" Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest. "Maxwell Zimmerman, I would be honored." He smiled, and Sarah thought she had never seen anything quite so wonderful. "Would you and Emily join me for dinner tonight? There is a restaurant here in town, nothing fancy, but the food is decent and we could talk about the future." "We would love to." That evening, the 3 of them sat together in the small restaurant Maxwell had mentioned. It was indeed nothing fancy, just a few wooden tables and simple food, but to Sarah it felt perfect. Maxwell laid out his situation honestly. "My ranch is not large, but it is profitable enough. I have a house, nothing grand, but it is solid and weatherproof. I have some land under cultivation and a small herd of cattle. With what I spent helping you find Emily, my savings are low, but I can rebuild them. It will take time and hard work, but I can do it." "Why are you telling us this?" Emily asked. "Because I want Sarah to have all the facts before she makes any decisions about her future. If she chooses to stay in Texas, I want her to know exactly what she would be signing up for." Sarah felt touched by his honesty. "What kind of decisions are we talking about?" Maxwell looked directly at her, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. "The kind that involve permanence. Sarah, I know we have not known each other long. I know most people would say it is too soon to talk about serious things. But out here, time moves differently. We have been through more together in 2 weeks than some people experience in years. And what I have learned is that I do not want to go back to my ranch alone. I do not want to go back to the way things were before I met you." Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I love you. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you stepped off that stagecoach, desperate and determined to find your sister. I fell more in love with you every day we spent together, watching you refuse to give up, watching you be brave even when you were terrified." Maxwell reached across the table and took her hand. "I am not asking you to make any promises tonight. I know you need time. But I wanted you to know how I feel." Sarah felt tears on her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I love you too," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I did not want to admit it to myself because everything was so complicated and uncertain, but I love you, Maxwell. These past few days without you have felt wrong, empty. You are what was missing." Across the table, Emily was smiling. "This is very romantic and I am happy for both of you, but can we address the practical concerns? If you two are planning a future together, where does that leave me?" "Living with us if you want," Maxwell said immediately. "The house has 3 bedrooms. You would be welcome for as long as you want to stay, and if you want to find your own path eventually, we will help you do that too." Emily looked between them. "You two barely know each other and you are already planning to live together. What about a proper courtship? What about getting married? I plan to marry her, Maxwell said calmly. As soon as she will have me. Why waste time on a long courtship when we both know what we want? You are proposing. Sarah's voice came out as a squeak. Not officially, not yet. I do not have a ring, and I should probably ask in a more romantic setting than a restaurant with your sister watching. But yes, eventually, I absolutely plan to propose. Maxwell's eyes were warm. Unless you think it is too fast. If you need more time, I understand. Sarah thought about everything they had been through together. The long ride across Texas. The nights by the campfire. The way he had never hesitated to help her, even when it cost him everything. The way she felt safe with him, cherished, understood. I do not think it is too fast, she said softly. I think when you know, you know. They talked for hours that night, making plans, dreaming about the future. Maxwell described his ranch in detail. The house he had built with his own hands, the land that stretched for miles, the small creek that ran through the property. Emily asked practical questions about what she would do with her time, and Maxwell suggested she might help with the books, or perhaps learn about managing livestock, or even start her own small business in town if that interested her. By the time they left the restaurant, Sarah felt like her heart might burst with happiness. Everything that had seemed so dark and hopeless just days ago now glowed with possibility. Maxwell walked them back to the boarding house. At the door, Emily excused herself tactfully, leaving Sarah and Maxwell alone. This is happening fast, Sarah said, looking up at him. Too fast. No, just fast, she smiled. But it feels right. You feel right. Maxwell cupped her face gently in his hands. May I kiss you, please? He kissed her softly, sweetly, and Sarah felt like everything in her life had been leading to this moment. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Marry me, Maxwell said. I know I said I would do this properly, but I cannot. Marry me, Sarah. Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy. Yes, Sarah said without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. They made plans to wed quickly. Just a simple ceremony at the church in Williamsburg with Emily and a few of Maxwell's ranch hands as witnesses. There was no reason to wait, no reason to drag out a long engagement when they were both certain. The wedding took place 2 weeks later, in early August of 1882. Sarah wore a simple blue dress she had bought in town, and Maxwell wore his best shirt and clean pants. Emily stood beside her sister, and Sarah could see that her sister was truly happy for her. The ceremony was brief, the minister speaking words about love and commitment while Sarah and Maxwell held hands and gazed at each other. When Maxwell slipped a simple gold band on her finger, Sarah felt like her old life was truly ending and her new one beginning. After the ceremony, they rode out to Maxwell's ranch. Sarah had insisted that Emily come with them immediately rather than staying in town, and her sister had agreed, though she made them promise to let her have the bedroom farthest from theirs. The ranch was even more beautiful than Maxwell had described. The house was indeed modest, but it was well built and comfortable. The land rolled gently around them, grass waving in the wind, and in the distance, Sarah could see the cattle grazing. Maxwell's ranch hands, 3 men in their 30s named Tom, Henry, and Joseph, greeted them warmly. They had apparently been expecting the new bride, and had made an effort to clean up the house, and even left wildflowers in a jar on the kitchen table. That first night in their new home, after Emily had retired to her room and the ranch hands had gone to the bunkhouse, Sarah and Maxwell sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over their land. "Are you happy?" Maxwell asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Happier than I have ever been," Sarah said honestly. "A month ago I was terrified, certain I would never see Emily again. Now she is safe, I am married to a wonderful man, and we have this beautiful place to call home. It feels almost like a dream." "It is real," Maxwell assured her. "And it is only going to get better." He was right. The following months were the happiest of Sarah's life. She learned the routines of the ranch, how to help with the cooking for the hands, how to tend the kitchen garden, even how to ride well enough to check on the cattle with Maxwell. Emily thrived in the open space and quiet of the ranch. The nightmares that had plagued her the first weeks after her rescue became less frequent. She started helping with the ranch books, and her natural head for numbers became apparent. She also began riding into Williamsburg twice a week to help at the church, finding purpose in assisting others. Winter came, cold but not unbearable. The small house stayed warm with the wood stove, and Sarah discovered she loved the isolation, the quiet evenings with just her husband and sister, the sense of peace that permeated everything. In January, Sarah realized she was pregnant. She told Maxwell one night as they lay in bed, and his joy was so pure and complete that it brought tears to her eyes. "A baby," he kept saying, his hand on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Emily was equally excited, already planning what she would make for the nursery, how she would help with the child. Sarah felt overwhelmed with gratitude for how her life had turned out. Their son was born in September of 1883, during a thunderstorm that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. Maxwell paced anxiously while Emily helped Sarah through the labor, and when the baby finally arrived, healthy and loud, Maxwell wept. They named him James, after Sarah and Emily's father. He was a beautiful baby with Maxwell's gray-green eyes and Sarah's dark hair. Life settled into a new rhythm. Sarah managed the house and cared for James while Maxwell worked the ranch. Emily continued helping with the books and had started teaching reading to some of the children in Williamsburg. The ranch prospered, and Maxwell was able to rebuild his savings and even expand his herd. When James was 2 years old, Sarah became pregnant again. This time it was a girl they named Catherine, with blonde hair like Emily and her father's calm temperament. Emily, now 24, had begun courting Tom, one of the ranch hands. He was a kind man, quiet and steady, and Sarah could see that her sister was finally ready to move forward with her own life. They married in the spring of 1886, and Maxwell helped Tom buy a small piece of land adjacent to the ranch where they could start their own homestead. Years passed in a blur of happiness. Sarah and Maxwell had 2 more children, another son named Michael and another daughter named Ruth. The ranch expanded and prospered. Emily and Tom had 3 children of their own, and their small farm grew successful. Sarah sometimes thought back to that hot June day in 1882, when she had stepped off the stagecoach in Williamsburg, terrified and alone. She thought about how one decision, one moment of desperate determination, had led to everything she now had. She was sitting on the porch one evening in 1895, watching the sun set when Maxwell came and sat beside her. Their children were playing in the yard, their voices carrying on the warm air. "What are you thinking about?" Maxwell asked, taking her hand. "How lucky I am. How different my life could have been." "We are both lucky," Maxwell said. "I was half dead from loneliness before you arrived. You brought me back to life." Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it? The money you spent, the risks you took?" "Not for 1 second. You and our family are worth more than all the money in the world." He kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Sarah. I love you too." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the Texas sky in brilliant shades of gold and purple. In the distance, Sarah could see Emily and Tom's house, smoke rising from their chimney. She could hear the laughter of her children, see her husband's strong profile beside her. She had come to Texas looking for her missing sister. She had found Emily, yes, but she had also found love, home, and a future brighter than anything she could have imagined. The wild frontier that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving had given her everything she never knew she needed. As darkness fell and the first stars began to appear, Maxwell stood and offered her his hand. "Come on, we should get the children to bed." Sarah took his hand and let him help her up, following him inside to the warm, lamp-lit house full of noise and life and love. Behind them, the prairie stretched away into darkness, vast and beautiful and full of possibility, just as it had been that first day. But now Sarah knew its secrets. She knew that beneath the harsh exterior was a land that rewarded courage and determination. She knew that sometimes the greatest adventures came from the darkest moments. And she knew that love, when it was right, could grow and flourish even in the toughest soil. Her story had started with fear and desperation, with a sister missing and a future uncertain. But it had become something far better than she could have dreamed. It had become a life rich with love, family, and the kind of happiness that came from facing challenges and emerging stronger on the other side. Years later, when her grandchildren asked her to tell them about how she met their grandfather, Sarah would smile and say, "I came to Texas looking for something I had lost. Instead, I found everything I never knew I needed." And every time she told the story, Maxwell would take her hand and squeeze it gently, and they would share a look that spoke of love that had endured through everything. Their life together was not always easy. There were hard winters and dry summers, times when money was tight and the work seemed endless. But they faced every challenge together, and their love only grew deeper with time. The ranch continued to prosper, and their children grew strong and healthy, eventually having families of their own. Emily and Tom remained close neighbors and dear friends, their children growing up alongside Sarah and Maxwell's. The two families helped each other through good times and bad, creating a community bound not just by proximity, but by genuine love and respect. As Sarah and Maxwell grew older, they would often sit on that same porch where they had spent so many evenings, watching their grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had once played. They would talk about the old days, about the wild journey that had brought them together, and they would marvel at how much had grown from that single moment of connection in Williamsburg so many years ago. Maxwell lived to be 78 years old, and Sarah held his hand as he passed peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by the family they had built together. Though her heart broke to lose him, Sarah took comfort in knowing that they had lived a full life together, rich with love and meaning. She lived another 5 years after Maxwell's death, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, telling stories of the old days and the man who had changed her life. When she passed at 83, she was buried next to Maxwell on a hill overlooking the ranch, a place where they could forever watch over the land they had loved. Their children continued the ranch's legacy, and the property stayed in the family for generations. The story of how Sarah came to Texas looking for her sister and found her true love became a family legend, passed down through the years as an example of courage, determination, and the unexpected ways that life can surprise us. The house Maxwell built with his own hands still stood strong 100 years later, sheltering generation after generation of their descendants. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the grass and the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, some swore they could still feel the presence of Sarah and Maxwell, their love forever woven into the land they had called home. In the end, it was a story of two people who found each other at exactly the right moment, when both needed hope and connection more than anything else. It was a story of love that transcended circumstance and grew strong through shared challenges. And it was a reminder that sometimes the most desperate moments of our lives are actually the doorways to our greatest joys. Sarah had arrived in Texas with nothing but fear and determination. She left a legacy of love, family, and proof that courage and kindness could create something beautiful even in the harshest of circumstances. Her story and her love with Maxwell became the foundation upon which generations built their lives, a testament to the power of love to transform everything it touches.